Right now, we're able to run on that irrigated ground about, it's getting close to 10 AUMs per acre, which is 10 animal unit months. So basically, I can take a 1,000-pound animal and keep them alive for 10 months on 1 acre. By the way, we're rotationally grazing and planned grazing and adaptive multi-paddock grazing on that place. And it's just because that's where our productivity is now. We took our soils from 2.45 to 7.75, and so that only took 10 years to get. So say we did that on all the lands that are kind of similar rainfall pattern to what we're doing on Alderspring on our home place. It's basically an equivalent of about 30, 35 inches a year. So then I just took, the 100 million head of cattle that, are in the United States and applied them to that model. And I was like, how many acres? How many acres is that? And what really, really threw me for a loop is I could keep all the soybean ground. I just had to use some of the corn ground and the current pasture ground. And I could grow the 100 million head. I could keep the 100 million head alive in the United States. And it was just on using 10 states worth of ground that's now being put into, dirt crops.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from Real Organic certified rancher Glenn Elzinga, who raises cattle and horseback in Idaho and continuously moves the herd across the land to positively impact the ecosystems that they're part of and maximize their nutritional intake. We ran the first half of this conversation a handful of weeks ago and are excited for you to hear the second half, which was recorded last fall when Glenn visited co-director Dave Chapman at his tomato farm in Vermont. Glenn was featured in the second session of our 2024 symposium, In Defense of Biology. Tickets are still available to watch the recordings to this if you missed it, so visit realorganicproject.org to watch the preview and find out all the details.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast, Part 2 with Glenn Elzinga. Thank you, Glenn, for squeezing us in this morning.
You bet.
What a great visit we've had. So, I've heard you talk in the last 4 days a lot about the really beauty and brilliance of what you're doing on Alderspring Ranch. I'd like to talk a little bit about the system surrounding you in the world that's embedded in, and not the beautiful natural ecosystem, but the human economic ecosystem.
Yeah.
And because people have no idea, and nor do I, and you do. So could you describe first what just a conventional, what does it mean, a conventional beef operation, completely non-organic,
Sure.
and what's that like? Why do you feel that that's not what people should be choosing to eat?
It's a big question because it's so dramatically different. So we just got to start at the ground level where these calves are born. And that part of it seems, at a glance, pretty innocuous in terms of the differences. It's mostly tied up in nuance, but it all becomes kind of cumulative in its aggregate effects to what the food becomes. So on a conventional ranch, these calves are usually born in the winter, at least in my area. Someplace like Texas, it's probably winter, but it's less, the weather conditions are much less adverse. But in our area, a lot of calves are born in January, February, and March, and that's most of them. It's probably 70% of the calves are born that way, and it's just, it's actually a pretty toxic environment for birth. And these producers have been pushed into this place by the feedlots, which they sell to. in the fall, because in order for them to maximize weight gain, the idea is that you want that calf born as early as you can, get it on mom's side, mom's lactating, and take that calf all the way through to like October or November, at which point it gets on a truck and goes bound for ultimately the feedlot. So anyway, that I wanted to talk about that time, because that time is actually completely out of the biorhythm of when these cows are predisposed to calve by their instinct, they're just wired to calve in time of longest day length. I mean, that's how everything else in nature calves. And that's actually why we shifted gears, because we were doing it. We were doing this January, February thing years and years ago. Carol and I were doing this, and it was a struggle. It was just a pure battle of, and it was a triumph of the will. And you're sleep deprived because you're up all night. Because if you're not out there and it's 20 below zero out, she calves out there in a snowbank, calf's going to freeze to the ground in a minute. So you have to get that calf up and sucking right away. Make sure she licks it off. If she doesn't, boy, you got to put them in a barn. A lot of people calve in a barn all the time because it's dry environment, and it's just just from an animal husbandry standpoint. I know these people love their cows, and it's beautiful the amount of care they put into them, but there's still quite a bit of stress there. And you got to remember there's this disconnect even at that level with these people that they're producing food. In most people's mind that are in conventional cow-calf agriculture, they just got a huge disconnect with the food. They love what they do, don't get me wrong. They a lot of them really honor the cow and they care for the cow, but they put them in these unfortunate situations where it can be very difficult on calf survival. And when you create all that stress, you're actually ultimately affecting the quality of your food. And so that's where it begins. And that's actually where the mentality hatches out. And the mentality I'm talking about is this kind of distanced from nature production model. And that starts in, when we did it, it starts in our minds in January. We have to keep them alive in this absolutely inhospitable environment. And that means we have to feed the cows, usually in terms of plant diversity, low diversity rations that have high amounts of protein, like pure alfalfa. I often get asked, I'll go to town or something like that. I was in church the other day and somebody said to me, how's that alfalfa crop look this year? And they just assume that everybody grows alfalfa. And we don't. We have alfalfa is one of our plant species, but those monocultures of alfalfa that everybody else is striving to grow so they can get cow survival, good lactation effects, to make it through the winter is not even on the table for us, because we calve during the longest days of the year in May, June, July. And you know what? We do nothing. We actually have there's like 220 of them. And we actually have a rule that you cannot go out in that 200-acre field. If you're going to go out there, you got to sneak around the edge, because we see these very, very important instinctual behaviors that cows are practicing. Like they have these nurseries set up. I mean, it's a very social organization. It's very stratified out there, and it's very intentional on these cows. They have that. Once you kind of reboot that instinct in them and allow them to manifest it, they just go crazy and follow that instinct through. So I just 100% don't let anybody go out there. Just let the cows do the thing. And it's so important. And because of that, we have great calving success. We don't have any illness. We don't have this thing called scours that's ubiquitous in the cow-calf ecosystem. And it's uncontrolled diarrhea that absolutely results in dehydration and ultimately mortality of a lot of calves. And these things are huge kind of toxic calving nightmares or husbandry nightmares. Like I get a good friend of mine, a very conventional producer. He's even calving late. And I was with him at a meeting, and great guy, fantastic guy. But he's in this paradigm again because of the sale paradigm he's in the fall. So he's got to get these calves ready and got to get enough size on them. And he's got about 1,500 mama cows that he runs. So that would be potentially 1,500 calves. And I knew it was a tough year on him. And I said, Bill, what are we looking like? How did that go? Like I said, I got utmost respect for this guy. And he's a way better cattleman than I am. He's just fantastic. And he said, don't really want to talk about it. And I said, that's fine. And I turned around to talk to somebody else, and he said, but I have to. And I turned back to him. I said, what do you got? He said, we lost 400 head this year. I said, it's like somebody punched me in the guts because I love this guy. And he said, how'd you do? I said, I don't really want to talk about that. And he knew why. He said, you're kind of running close to 100%, aren't you? Alive. I said, yeah. So his calving window ends the day, May 1, that ours starts. And this year, in the high mountain valleys of the Intermountain West, that's exactly when winter quit. And we were getting snowstorms, like major snowstorms all the way through April, even into a little bit into May. But actually, you could keep a calf alive starting May 1. And Mama would calve out there in the field, out there in the green meadows. It was all turning green. And she'd have, we do, if we're feeding and supplementing hay out there on our pastures, if we see, we're always watching the weather. If we see bad weather coming, we'll put them in a place where they don't get wind exposure so that they can succeed in what they do best. So that's really where it starts. And it's this unfortunate place that they've painted themselves into. And it's because they're in this feedlot paradigm that starts in October, November. So these animals, a lot of them enter a feedlot at that time. And feedlot, pretty simple ration. All that biological diversity that you could be getting that would show up in your food ends up becoming monocultural. Just almost a reckless adherence to monoculture in a feedlot bunk. And so, either that or guess what? They hit a monoculture in terms of grain feed, and a lot of it is wheat pasture. It's stuff that's regrowth from the wheat harvest, or maybe they drilled something over it. Maybe it's like annual ryegrass in Oklahoma or Texas on these pivots that are pumping water out of the Ogallala aquifer unsustainably, I might add, and slowly deepening their wells. It's so complicated. The amount of I can't really point a finger at somebody and say this is wrong-headed. It's the whole thing that's wrong-headed. It's the whole paradigm that we've put these beef cattle in and the production model into, and it's all because we have created a premium for fatty beef in a certain age class, and it's called USDA's grading system, and it identifies select cattle, choice cattle, and prime cattle, and that's all based on fat deposition cut in a very specific spot between the 13th and 14th rib on a carcass, and that's analyzed by a grader, and a premium is assigned to whether or not those cattle meet those criteria. So that's the target everybody's on. At the beginning in January when they calve, they are thinking, I got to get the premium somehow. And if they're a cow-calf guy, they're just thinking, I got to get the most weight out there by October, November, because you get paid by the pound. And that's the bigger check you're going to get. Then the feedlot person takes over. Maybe they backgrounded them on annual ryegrass pastures in Oklahoma and Kansas, pumping out of the aquifer on those pivots. And then by January, February, March, they're in a feedlot until the day they die. Average finish period to get to USDA choice is probably 18 months.
So they're 18 months in the feedlot after.
No, it's 18 months total lifespan.
Total lifespan. Okay.
Yep.
How long in the feedlot?
So that varies a lot. It depends if they can find like cheap wheatgrass pasture or ryegrass pasture, you know. So that's called backgrounding. And so you're just feeding them this monoculture of this, you know, grass that you put in them. And they suck it up. They're basically eating sugar. So that's, it's the supersized me for cattle, okay? Because the more we can feed into them in terms of energy, the faster they're going to gain weight. So, you know, it's all about getting energy into those calves. So, you know, foundationally, you've built structure as a cow-calf producer all the way through the summer, turn them out on public lands grazing, and you're, you know, sacrificing some of the mom's weight toward the end of the summer. She's feeding her baby. Anyway, this baby is predisposition now just structurally, physiologically to really gain weight in those situations. Calf comes off those rangelands pretty dang healthy because guess what? You know, he or she was grazing this beautiful biodiversity, albeit, you know, it may be altered by 150 years of continuous grazing. Some of that stuff is not so great, but a lot of the public lands ranges out there in the West are still in pretty good shape in terms of, you know, plant diversity, even though community ecology-wise, they are broken. But anyway, these calves come back and they're predisposed to really go because they're in good shape. You know, they're very healthy. But anyway, then we take them from this huge biological diversity and we put them onto a monoculture, and guess what? They pop, they go crazy. They start laying on pounds like crazy. But this is the problem I have with that as a food item. And I think that biological diversity, I talked to Fred Provenza once about this. I said, how long does that phytochemical richness last? You know, and he said, you know, the jury's out on that. He said, but I don't really believe you're going to have permanence of those chemicals, those plant compounds beyond, say, 180 days. So guess what? Here we are. Now we go on to these monocultures. These calves start ingesting these very, very simple carbohydrate-rich grasses, and then ultimately carbohydrate-rich feedlot rations, you know, which includes stuff like corn and dried distillers grains, which happen to be quite toxic. Actually, both of them do. And you have to, you know, very closely monitor your animals from acidosis because otherwise they could die. So, you know, there's a lot of hacks to this. This is why nutritionists, if you're going to run a feedlot, you have to have a nutritionist because you want to keep your cattle from dying before they reach that time. You know, so there's this dance going on. Oh, you know, these cattle might die, so I better change the ration accordingly. So we keep them alive until they enter slaughter.
So they're going through this supersize me process.
Supersize me process.
A great deal like
That's exactly what it is.
Like the human supersize me, which is
like
you're eating junk food.
Yep.
But you're putting on weight like crazy.
Yep. It's because it's all energy.
It's all energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got none of that diversity of compounds that you find in all these plant species. I think they're up to having identified about 100,000 of these compounds that they're in plants, and then they know there's
unbelievable.
a million more that we don't even have a name for. We don't, and even of the 100,000, we don't understand necessarily what role, what function that might serve, but we're pretty sure it serves some function.
Yes. Yeah. And for us, not only for the animal, right? We're talking about us here. And, you know, so then in contrast, you put them on this corn diet. And what we're doing now is creating food that has all these inflammatory markers, you know, that are going to cause heart disease, that are going to cause obesity, that are going to cause, you know, LDL and HDL problems in our diet, you know, and it's just like the formula, you know, you could have captured a formula of phytochemicals or compounds that result from corn and stuff like that and say, hey, let's formulate something that's going to cause illness in humans, chronic illness. And we've done that really well. You know, and we've created it, and it's called commercial beef. So from a food standpoint, yeah, absolutely, not a good idea. And try to stay, that Eat Lancet thing that came out a few years ago really pissed off a lot of beef producers and stuff, because these people are saying, hey, you know, for climate change and for human health, we really need to reduce our red meat intake to under 3 ounces a week. You know, and you know what? You know what's weird about that is, as a beef producer, I shockingly agree with them, because if it's that kind of beef, I don't even want to eat the 3 ounces. Okay, no, I'll pass. Thank you very much on 3 ounces. For me, if you ask me how many ounces of red meat I eat a week, I don't know what it is a week, but a day it's around 32 to 40. Okay, 32 to 40 ounces of my beef a week. But somebody else's beef, it ain't no happening deal. I mean, you can force feed it to me. I think I'd rather become a vegan, because this stuff is not good for us. So, but then I got to go on the side of the animal as well and say, from a husbandry standpoint, from just a compassionate care standpoint of what these animals are, and what they can become in a right system, and what their potential is, and what that possibility is in husbandry. I think it's wrong. I mean, I've worked in feedlots, right? I've fed them the rations. You sprinkle antibiotics with the ration every day. You put a little bit of oxytetracycline in there. And what it turns out to be, and people don't even know why, it's a feed additive that increases conversion, increases digestion, increases the weight gain. So you put that on there, and it keeps abscesses from becoming infected in their guts. So you're feeding Oxytet, maybe once every day. You're sprinkling a little bit on their flake corn or steamed corn ration, whatever you're doing. And we've done all this, and they gain weight like crazy. It's laughing. We were feeding them 25, 30 pounds of corn a day to each animal, and it's funny watching them gain weight. It's like, holy cow, they are going, and it's exciting times, because you can convert that animal into a very fatty animal in a very short time. So, and that's the feedlot paradigm. It's like, it's perceived as beauty, and it couldn't be farther from the truth.
So people are getting paid for the wrong thing.
They're getting paid for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of nutrient density, we're just talking about productivity. We're not talking about profitability in terms of human wellness. We're talking about productivity in terms of weight gain on a cow.
Vandana Shiva talks about, she said we should not be talking about yield per acre. We should be talking about health per acre.
Exactly. She's exactly 100% right.
Completely different way of looking at everything.
Yeah. There was, I got into an argument with somebody, and it was on a podcast, and it convicted me, because I was like, I need numbers to show this. So they said, well, your model's great, Glenn. Thank you. Thank you so much for contributing. This is a fantastic idea, but the problem is, you got coming 10 billion people on the planet Earth, and, the 3 ounces of animal protein that Lancet recommends, we're not even going to be able to grow that according to your model. And I said, I don't know what that looks like, but let me actually put some numbers together. And we never got back together on that subject, but it wasn't hard. So I just took what my current production is on my small place. And the small place is, the irrigated pastures, because I said, this is actually more conveyable to like the heartland of America. And so I don't remember the exact numbers in my head right off the bat, but I was actually very happy. So anyway, right now we're able to run on that irrigated ground about, it's getting close to 10 AUMs per acre, which is 10 animal unit months. So basically I can take a 1,000-pound animal and keep them alive for 10 months on 1 acre. By the way, we're rotationally grazing and, planned grazing and adaptive multi-paddock grazing on that place. And it's just because that's where our productivity is now. We took our soils from 2.45 to 7.75. And so that only took 10 years to get. So say we did that on all the lands that are kind of similar rainfall pattern to what we're doing on Alderspring on our home place. It's basically an equivalent of about 30, 35 inches a year. So then I just took, the 100 million head of cattle that, are in the United States and applied them to that model. And I was like, how many acres? How many acres is that? And you know what really, really threw me for a loop is I could keep all the soybean ground. I just had to use some of the corn ground and the current pasture ground. And I could grow the 100 million head. I could keep the 100 million head alive in the United States. And it was just on using 10 states worth of ground that's now being put into, dirt crops, with open soil and uncovered soil. And I was like, this is not impossible. This is actually 100% doable. And we could provide food that's actually real food now, that's nutrient diverse food, and got that density that people can live on and thrive on and not eat 3 ounces, way more than 3 ounces. They could eat like Glenn eats, in terms of that kind of red meat consumption, because now all of a sudden this red meat is delivering this incredible phytochemical richness from all these plants that you start picking up as you invest in your soils. Because as you invest in your soils, you start just naturally picking up. We didn't plant our home pastures. We started out with 3 species. Now we're up to 80. That seed bank was there, or traveled in from adjacent wild ground. And it's there. It's ready for us to just drop the chemicals and start withdrawing from that kind of system and create a new system that's like resilient and nutrient dense.
And the inputs on that land in terms of like something you brought from somewhere else, are there any?
You know what? I had a friend of mine call me. He was trying to become an organic producer. And he said, I don't know what you're doing about fertilizer, but it's killing me. I said, what's that mean? And he said, it's killing me. I spent $160,000 last year on organic fish emulsion and fertilizers. He said, it's killing me. What are you using? And I said, you're kidding me, right, Joe? He said, no, it's killing me. I can't do this. He said, what do you use? I said, well, I think you've heard of it. It's called hay. He said, what? I said, it's called hay. He said, what do you mean? He said, you're growing hay? I said, no. We're feeding hay. I said, so we feed this hay, just like you do on our fields. And we're just very organized about how we lay that hay across the fields. Our cattle eat it right out there. We don't ever put them in a corral. They're always outside. So we're supplementing our stockpile grazing with this hay. And I said, so we're importing biomass. And I said, there's willing producers of hay everywhere that want to sell you this biomass. So, and I can even find organic hay. It's everywhere to put on the ground and feed these cows. And he said, so what are you talking about? I said, well, you're talking about importing biomass. And when you import biomass, you're feeding your soil. I said, you got to get out of your mindset that you're feeding your cows. For us, the actual soil comes first in terms of feeding. I said, so when you put that hay on the ground, you're creating biological activity because they're always going to waste some. In fact, when we feed hay, even if it's high dollar, expensive hay, which it was this last year, we're still wasting about 10% of it. We're planning on wasting 10% of it because, for one, we got a grass-fed beef finishing program. I don't want them to eat the junky hay. I want them to walk on it and lay on it and just put that cellulose and lignin down against the ground, okay, and put it in contact with the soil. And for second, it is feeding the soil. So I'm just planning on that much loss. And for third, it's actually providing some thermal insulation for my animals that are going to lay on that stockpile, lay on that hay. And especially young calves, they're going to keep warmer. They're going to have better thermal efficiency. And for fourth, it's going to create more thermal efficiency for the soil itself, because the soil is still biologically active. I had Nicole Masters spend a bunch of time with me, and we talked about winter soil. And she said it's still actually measurable, the life that's going on in soils at sub-zero temperatures above ground. When you have biologically active soils, they're still alive and kicking. They're kicking slowly, but they're still kicking, even when it's 20 or 30 degrees below zero.
So the hay is being fed when it's cold.
Yeah.
That's when you're bringing the hay in.
Yeah, so it's a huge biological input. It's biomass. Wow, it's like you with compost.
So let me ask the hard question.
Yes.
What about the land where the hay comes from?
So that's, you know what? I was talking to a certifying person, and I said, I think it was even in the context of real organic, and I said, so what about them? What about them? I'm extracting these cattle from their place because we were buying some certified organic yearlings. And the thing we did about the certified organic yearling purchase from other people is we made sure we went there. My daughter and I would go there. And I asked Melanie as we're driving out to drive, okay, what do you give them on a scorecard? What do you give them? Because they had to be kind of, the same vibe of husbandry, as we were. I've been to places, we're going to buy cattle. They got rock, country rock music going loud. They're running hot shots. They're just super loud with the cattle. They're, chasing them with four-wheelers. And it's like 100%, I think what we're doing when we buy cattle from people like that, and we never do, is we're actually buying their, adrenals that are in those cattle because they've been stressed out all their life, and, that might turn into histamines or whatever, I don't know, but I just think all those inflammatory stress markers are not something we ever want in our food, right? So anyway, I asked this person about that. I said, so what about those cattle? And they said, that's not your problem. That's their problem. If they want to export hair cattle and they're organic or real organic, they do have to figure out that budgeting system, So it's not mining, it's not extractive use. So he said, just focus on your own deal. Because he said, you can do this forever.
Right.
You could just say, wait a second, we took this from here, like we use Redmond mineral, and it comes out of the ground. So I think that's cool, but what if we got it from somebody else? Say, with Dave, what about the chicken manure, that you might input into your compost heap?
Right. But my question is I'm just curious. I know a guy, lifelong organic farmer, and he said, well, of course, organic doesn't work without Haber-Bosch. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he said, well, he was from California. He said, all these organic farms are working off compost from CAFOs, and those CAFOs are all fed with Haber-Bosch nitrogen.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, that's a valid conversation. Let's have it.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, can you grow hay sustainably without ultimately relying on an input like that? In other words, can that be also a self-fed farm?
I think it can be.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's got to be your business.
That's got to be your, I get it.
That's got to be your business. Hopefully you got some animal impact on your place to mitigate the extractive loss from removing that biomass.
Yeah.
So, and that's something we all have to do. It's our duty to do that. Otherwise you're going to end up with soil depletion, right?
Right.
You're going to be hurting your own biology. So, I don't know what that looks like. If it were me, I would say, hey, we're only going to take, it's kind of like milk. For me, it's analogous to milk. Okay, I'm going to haul this milk off and we're extracting that. It's slightly analogous to beef, but I think that's further removed. But, that milk is consistent energy flow that's outside of your system. And your consumers are never giving back. They're never giving back some sort of byproduct. That they don't show up with a bag of compost from their own process and say, here, Tim, here's your exchange for that milk you've been giving me, that energy flow. Yeah. So that means that Tim with the dairy has to really conceptualize how he's going to mitigate that energy flow. But the thing that we have here in soil is this incredible regenerative system. It's creating something out of nothing. It's taking mineral material in our soil, our parent material, and creating life from that. And we need to be there in that place to facilitate that relationship, to build soils, because we can build them. I think you and I were just talking about, I think it was you, we're talking about how this, just 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last glaciation, this was parent material, man. We're standing on parent material here. There's no organic matter, and yet here we are. Here we are. We got the northern hardwood forests. We got all these beautiful meadows. There's a lot of organic matter here. There's a lot of soil that has developed since that time. And that's a short time geologically. But the cool thing is that regenerative power underground is so much that we could do it, easily within our lifetime. We could do it over and over within our lifetime and facilitate that.
We can become the facilitators.
Yeah, we can be a catalyst.
That's right.
It's really a catalyst instead of saying, oh, just, let's let natural process continue. But we can come in there and say, we're going to catalyze the natural process and really move it forward. And
so let me ask you, so you were just talking about the process of regeneration. And of course, there is now a movement that means many things to many people.
Many things.
And I'm just curious, so you talked about conventional ag, kind of what that looked like, and the feedlot, and then you've talked to me about regenerative. And what does that mean in your world?
Wow. Yeah, so there's 100 million uses of that word, and many of them today are inappropriate. Remember just, 20, 30 years ago, it was all sustainable ag. Well, is this sustainable? Now that word is everywhere, right? So it's become an unfortunate, it's just the unfortunate demise of a buzzword that's got no certification behind it, that's got no third party check-in. That's the value of organic, that's the value of real organic. But for me, regenerative is still, personally, it's a valuable word, because that means that we're actually, we're moving forward in terms of building life. We're adding life to a system. Even if there's all processes of agriculture are somewhat extractive. I mean, Tim is removing milk from the system. We're removing beef from our system. We're taking it off that ground. But, I was driving down our road that runs right through the middle of the ranch. It's called Doughton Lane. And I was looking at that. And I thought of the thousands and thousands and maybe millions of pounds of beef that have left that ranch. And it was just incredible to me that we could do that. This perceived extractive removal of this 1 million pounds of beef that has come off that ranch. And, the cool thing for me, on one side of it was, wow, we've provided real food for people. We've given them real nutrition. But the other side of it, in spite of that, we've been able to build life and add life. In terms of both, the subsoil ecosystem, which I've become extremely focused on in the past few years, and the above ground ecosystem, the biodiversity of not only those plants, those 85 species of plants on the home place, the 2,200 plants up on that wild rangeland, but also the ungulates, the amphibians and all that stuff. And that's what excites me about the word regenerative, because that really is what we all have the potential to become in agriculture. But we have to look to nature, that grand design, and say, how did this function before we start dinking around with it? And what lessons can we learn from that to be the catalyst to create that regenerative presence? A lot of people think there's a cap to soil biology, soil organic matter. It's like, well, it's going to end here. And I'm skeptical, because right now, we're only surveying that top 15 cm, the top 15 centimeters. That's all we're doing our survey on, because guess what? It's, rocky, crap, glacial deposit underneath it. But I know because we have deep-rooted perennials. Some of these alfalfas will reach, or clovers that we have tons of different kinds of clovers now. And a lot of the grasses are reaching down as far as 10 feet underground. And I know they're putting the deep organic matter down. They're putting deep carbon in there. Very difficult to volatilize that. It's locking it down there forever. And it's because we've changed from just this kind of ephemeral, annually based system into a long-term perennial system. So I guess that's what's so exciting to me about regenerative.
That's right.
Because I'm creating something for the far distant future. I'm bringing something back from a failed system where, people who are ignorant, and it's not ignorant in a bad way. It's just the fact of the matter was genuine ignorance. And I was there. I was there just 30 years ago, because I took soil science, right? And soil sciences was structure and chemistry, those two things. We hardly talked about biology. We hardly talked about it. And now, we're just opening the door on this thing, and we're just beginning to skim the surface of what that actually means. What does it mean that when you have a teaspoon of soil and it's got more living inhabitants in it than people on Earth? There's 10 billion critters in a teaspoon of good soil. What does that even mean? And who are those inhabitants? We have no idea. We have no idea. And we are just beginning to start to see relationships in that connectivity. But yet, this is what's exciting. We don't have to know. We can just say, have at it, guys. And we started to figure out how to create those relationships to allow them to just take off. And that's what's so exciting, because I'm still ignorant. But yet it's happening, and so that means the bar is low for us to be successful here. We don't have to be like huge soil biotic agents, we don't have to understand all this stuff. You held up a bunch of worms in your tomato crop yesterday and you said, this one I don't think is good, and this one, but we don't have to even know that. We don't even have to know those particulars, because it's an ecosystem and they're going to fight it out on their own. All we got to do is be there to facilitate their action.
And it's just like you said in the field, like the greater the diversity of species, the better it all works out.
It does.
That's right. So we're trying to facilitate the diversity.
Exactly.
And it will work it out.
Yeah, and we can walk through there and see it,
So I got to ask you a hard question. So, okay, you're talking about regenerative as a concept and as a way of understanding the world. Yep. What about regenerative certification? Because that's coming right now.
Oh gosh, you got to hit me with this too.
Yeah. I just, do you
I guess great idea, but I'd have to see it to believe it and see how it's going to work, because right now people are claiming regenerative and there's different people who are quote unquote certifying that. I don't see any consistency. There's absolutely 100% no consistency. I see, soybean growers who are raising biological deserts just because they're at their no-till, they're, we're regenerative. All of a sudden, soybeans, go from biological desert to regenerative. And I'm not getting it. To me, I smell a rat in there somewhere, and the rat's not on the ground, by the way. He can't live in a soybean field because there's nothing alive in a soybean field except a soybean plant. It's a toxic environment, and I'm scratching my head. I'm saying, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And until I see some integrity of what it looks like in terms of actually sustaining and enhancing nature, I can't get on the bandwagon. I'm very unexcited now about the regulatory expression of where this word may go. It's very disappointing.
Let me ask you another hard question, because we talked about it some. You also felt that the regulatory world around organic, I'm not talking about real organic, but USDA organic, is slipping even more. And what does that mean? What kind of things are being permitted that you go, that should not be called organic?
Yeah, and I think it's slipping in more ways than we can even be cognizant of, because there's an infinite amount of pressure. Maybe I don't know if I'd technically call them lobbyists, but I just feel like there's multitudinous ways that people are attempting to niggle at the letter of the law. They're certainly trying to niggle at the spirit of the law. We know that. We know there's people who are just 100% in organic for economic gain. So anything we can do, to try to mitigate that, I'd like to see happen, but I don't even know what that looks like, because I can't even guess where it's going to come from next. So I don't even know where these things come from. Like, for instance, my organic inspector's looking in my vet shed the other day, and they're like, "Oh, flufenicol, that's." It's trade name Nuflor. I think, no, it's Prevail. These are anti-inflammatories. They're basically NSAIDs for cattle. And non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. You know, it's like ibuprofen for cattle. And she said to me, you know, that's legal now. That's actually legal and organic. I said, wait, this is 100% synthetic substance, 100%. I mean, organics, no synthetics, right? And she said, yeah, but this one's legal now. You can use it. You don't have to tell anybody. We do ask that you record the use, but there's no disclosure required on your customer association. And it was like somebody just kicked me in the gut there. You know, it's like, wait, you're telling me to be not upfront with my customers now? I don't have to tell them that I use a synthetic compound in the raising of their animals, you know? And that, to me, you know, there was a huge issue because all of a sudden I just felt like violated because I'm part of an organization now that, you know, associated with the NOP that now has like intentionally created a system where we're doing things under the table that the consumer doesn't need to know about. We're doing this, but yet we're organic. And to me, that's hugely unfortunate. It's really a little devastating to me when I see that stuff happening. You know, it happened with you know, the ability of you to do anything with a cow that's in the first 2 trimesters. You could put porons on that animal. You could you know, doctor them for antibiotics or whatever in that first 2 trimesters of life, where that calf is in utero. And I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Who said that, you know, that calf's not affected in utero during those first 2 trimesters? I mean, these are formative trimesters, right? We know that from, you know, human gestation. Hugely formative. It's where everything's getting hooked up. All the synapses are joining and all this stuff, you know, all this hugely, you know, critical, these systems are getting put in place. And yet we can apply chemicals to the calf at that point and still consider it organic, you know, and yeah, so that's a very frustrating situation to me to be in, because I feel like everywhere I look, every time I turn around, there's another surprise for the, you know, that would be a potentially extremely negative surprise for the consumer to find out about what's happening to the brand of organic. And, you know, these things don't get publicized. It's like, not like the NOP says, oh, by the way, we're allowed, you know. So it was like this thing where, oh, no, you can use that. You know, it's my inspector who's telling me this. So the consumer has no idea. Yeah. You know, and I think most people just roll with it. I said, cool, man. Yeah, NACED's for cattle. I'm going to do it all the time now. Fantastic, you know, and I don't need to tell my consumer. And that's weird. Okay, that's a weird place to be, you know, where we've built this consumer trust. You know, I write a blog, and I get people respond to it a lot of times. And, you know, people are like, the reason I won't buy from you if you're not certified organic is because it's too much to ask for me to trust you. I haven't been to your place. I'm in Florida. I'm never going to get there. I need the third-party certification. So, you know, if that's the critical need for them, who are they going to trust when they find out that the USDA is nickel and diming them to death? Yeah. They can trust no one.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. So I want to bring it home because you got to go. There's so much more to talk about.
Oh gosh, we could just hang out. So.
I know.
And we have been. You know, it's been fantastic.
I know, it's been fantastic.
And a lot of times, you know, we end on this serious note, but it's still a lot of fun, and we're laughing a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's a great place to be. There's so much potential here, especially when we start seeing that, you know, something like soil has more life than we ever imagined. You know, it's just kicking our butt to find out what is possible in that thing we used to call dirt. You know, it's just so exciting to see that foundation expand. And sit down and go out in your tomatoes or on my place, on my ground, and pick up a load of that stuff. For us, it's almost bentonite, is all these fine clays. Originally, when we got there, it was white soil, and now it's dark, and it's got aggregate, and it smells heavenly. It's just this beautiful smell that resonates in us. And so you start seeing stuff like that, and it gets really exciting.
Yeah.
It gets you up in the morning.
Yes, it is exciting. Glenn Elzinga, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do. I'm serious. You really, you inspire a lot of people, and I think that what happens is that grows, and then they inspire people.
I do
and
think
people
that.
start to do it differently. And one of the things that you and so many other of these organic pioneers prove is that this does work.
Yes. Yeah.
It works.
It does. Yeah. And it's easy to find out for yourself.
That's right.
It's easy to facilitate that change. It's so easy because nature's powerful. It's way more powerful than we are. A lot of times all we need to do is get out of the way.
All right. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Dave. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.